Good evening, everyone. You've joined us live this evening. My name is CJ Lee. I'm your guest and host. Sorry, I'm not your guest and host. I'm your host for They Call Me Coach. This evening's guest is Kenrick Liburd, London born and bred. Is that right, Kenrick?
Yeah, that's correct. London, East
East
London,
London,
Torrey
East
Gate
London.
boy. Yeah,
Excellent, excellent. So, Kenrick, great to have you on the show this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I understand that you're actually on holiday, so you're taking some time out of your family time to kind of tune in with us. That's great to hear.
yeah, definitely. No, it's exciting. I mean, I don't know if when you're coaching, if you're ever on holiday, but I think, I think for the most part, I've tried to take a break. We're away a little bit with my wife and my daughter, so that's really good. Yeah, excited to be doing it.
Excellent, excellent. So, as we do every week, we remind anybody who's not listened to us before that we're not a journalism show. The idea is to kind of understand who's doing what in British basketball. We've done a lot around kind of the women's game because there aren't enough shows kind of focused on the women's game, but we've interviewed coaches from up and down the country, east and west, north and south. So we've got someone in the Midlands today, which is nice. So we've got a good spread. Um, and as we do at the beginning of every show, I normally talk about how I know the coaches, and I can say this now because I had a quick chat with Kenrick before the show went live, and every now and again you come across a coach who maybe starts coaching at kind of national level, on coaching one of the national teams, and you're like, well, who's this guy? Because I've not heard this guy, and I've been in the country, I've been coaching, paying my dues, and Kenrick, when you came, I think when you came back to the UK, you started working with a friend of mine, Lee Ryan, and the Oakland guys, and I was like, yeah, who's this guy? I don't really know who he is. So we have met a couple of times since then, and that wasn't my introduction at all. We just had a very kind of cordial kind of chat, and then we'll catch up. But we've never really had an opportunity to kind of exchange kind of thoughts and ideas about the game of basketball. So tonight we're going to do a little bit of that, and hopefully everybody else who's listening will get some value out of that.
Nice. Yeah,
Is
no,
that
it's
cool?
exciting. Yeah, sounds good.
Excellent.
Really, really good.
So, as we do at the beginning of every show, we always get the guests to talk about their journeys, and take as much time as you like to talk about kind of where did it all start for you, and how did you get to where you are today.
Yeah, I mean that's a good loaded question, to start us off. I think, for me, I grew up in East London, grew up in Forest Gate. Those teams. I had a chance to play. You know, I started with Tony Garbaletto, but only really a few sessions in Newham, and then I was part of that first group, that Newham Youngbloods group with Caroline Charles. She picked us up when Tony left, and then I ended up playing a couple of years there and went on to work with Humph Long, and play for East London Royals. I got a chance to train with London Leopards, working with Bob Donald Jr. and Billy Mims, being a training player for those squads. So that was a really good experience for me. And then um, pretty much I did one more year in the UK. I played for Mark Lloyd in Colchester. Um, and then I went out to the States and went to school, went to two NAIA schools, one in Nebraska, one in Maine, Machias, where I had a chance to get to the national tournament. Then all of a sudden, the opportunity came to start coaching. I really started to enjoy that side of it. I got into AAU basketball out there, started coaching college. I tore my Achilles tendon. That came back and started to kind of get more into the coaching side of it. Found out that I really kind of enjoyed coaching a little bit more than I did playing, which was a surprise to me. But it was something that just I loved doing. So I had a couple of AAU teams out there, and then I started coaching high school in the States, and I ended up coaching 4 years of high school in the States, alongside AAU. And then I ended up moving to a university. I coached at a university, Tennessee Temple in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I coached there for 4 years as well. And then what did I do after that? And then I became the AD as well. There, I became the athletic director there as well. And then I came back to England, and I did 2 years with Mark Lloyd at Barking with those teams. We got to the trophy final, lost to Sheffield in the trophy final with Mark. My second year, it was one of those classes that had a lot of good kids go to the States. You know, your Savannah Wilkinsons and Abigail Johnson, a lot of those GB young kids. And then, like you said, that's when I went to coach with Lee Ryan at Oakland, and then went back to Barking for another year before I ended up at Nottingham. And I think since I've been back in England for about 6 years, and you're right. I think a lot of people think that you kind of, they don't really know me like that. Even though there's a lot of people that I know from the time I was here as a player or when I was younger, but from a coaching perspective, they didn't know me. But one of the things I was able to do when I was here, I was able to coach the regional team in the tournament. We won the London region with the boys. I then went and coached the East region. I was the head of the East region and the head of the London region. So I did the RPCs when they were RPCs before they became Aspire. So I did 2 years of that. I coached a development in the development league or the conference with Chelmsford with Chris Michaelides. I'm probably butchering his name. He'll get me for that, but that's life. And we went 17-1. I took over that team because he was in a bind, so I wasn't really planning to, but I helped him out. We went 17-1 in that year and got to the final. I didn't end up coaching the final, but that's a different story for a different day. But it was good to work with him. And then I'm trying to think what else I did. Oh, and then I also started an ABL program, Havering College, which is like Havering, just outside of Romford, Hornchurch area, and got that off the ground. Did a couple of years there before I moved to Nottingham to take over the Wildcats WBL, and my title is lead performance coach. So basically, I'm head of development for the younger kids, and primarily I work with individuals and looking at their pathway, but also I lead the WBBL and the academy, Nottingham Academy Wildcats, the WEABL girls. So I
Wow.
guess that's a bit of a synopsis.
Yeah, that is one hell of a synopsis. So look, this is one of the reasons I love doing the show, because we all think we know people in the game, and we follow people, we follow coaches, we follow players, and yeah, it's very easy sometimes to make assumptions about the people, maybe the names that you don't recognize. And particularly, I think because you had that long spell out of the country, and I'm gonna ask you about that first, because I know for when I was coming through as a coach, one of my aspirations was to coach abroad, and technically I have coached abroad. I've coached on camps, I've coached at tournaments in Europe, excuse me, in Yugoslavia, etc. But really, what a lot of us want to do, and what we recognise we have to do if we want to improve, is we have to get outside of the UK, and we have to experience different types of basketball, different cultures, different systems, different philosophies. So, as someone who managed, yeah, initially, you went out as an athlete. Maybe the injury almost kind of forced your hand, but by that time it sounds like you were already getting into coaching. You were already realizing that maybe coaching was in your DNA. Um, as somebody who got out of the UK and was coaching abroad, and you've talked about AAU and being an assistant director at a program and being a head coach at a program. Why on earth did you come back to the UK? What brought you back?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time, one my daughter, we had her in April, and she was born in the States, and then we came back following that. The school I was at was going through some different transitions. I was the AD at the moment at the time in Tennessee Temple, and it was the right thing for us and our family to be able to come back to the UK. You know, if I'm being honest, I thought we would always come back later in my coaching career. By that time, I was starting to think about my pathway and where I was going to go. I thought we'd come back later. It just happened to be at that point, you know, as a family, we chose, you know, it was an opportunity to bring my daughter back and let my daughter experience, you know, her grandparents and, you know, and family and be in the UK. I ticked a lot of the boxes. I had my master's degree. I'd had some college experience. I'd done some things there, and you know, I always wanted to coach national team, but I thought it would be later. And yeah, you know, sometimes with the paperwork and some different issues like that, you know, some things are out of your hands as well. You know, and at the time, it made more sense for us to come back. Um, yeah, I think I guess that explains it as best as I can. Um,
Hey, look, family should be the number one thing, and obviously that's a point of view. But for me, you know, my basketball family is so important to me that that journey that I take with them and the various places that I've coached throughout my kind of career. But family always comes first. So I totally kind of understand that, and I think you know it says a lot about you as a person when you make your decisions based on what's best for you know your wife and your daughter and the other people around you as opposed to just basketball.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you know, I think I got to the point where I kind of understood that, you know, like you said, there were so many different places you can coach and so many different things you can learn, and I was at the point where, just like anything, you know, you start to work, you start to put yourself in experiences when I'd hired enough people to know these are the kind of tick box exercises that you have to go to get into the interview process. I'd done some of those things, so I put myself in a position where I felt quite comfortable that if the right situation came in the US again, because of my education and because of my experience, as long as I would put myself in good situations in the UK or in Europe, I would then have the opportunity to again go back into the States in the right situation. Because that's it as well. I think that, you know, we can't assume that every situation is the right situation, whether you're in the UK or the US. There's different coaching environments for everybody, and you know, the resources you have aren't always, you know, me as a coach, I always want to have an equal playing field. So, you know, right now, obviously being able to coach in the Academy League and in Nottingham Wildcats, I feel like I'm getting to the point where I feel like I've got an equal playing field. Where so I look around with my competitors and we can put teams together, and my teams are competitive because, you know, I feel like I've got an opportunity to showcase the ability to coach because of the environment I'm in. And I think as well as I move through, you know, like you said, I've been in coaching a little while in the States now. So I coached high school, I coached AAU. I started to understand what things were really important to me as a coach, what kind of environments were important to me as a coach. Whereas a lot, you know, I'm having these conversations with a lot of young people now, young coaches, and just trying to explain to them, like, you know, you've got to make sure that you're in the right environments for you to succeed and for you to ensure that the people around you can succeed. Whereas a lot of people, you know, when you're early in coaching, you just want coaching jobs, don't you? You just want whatever job they give you, you know, and you're not really
Yeah.
thinking about that environment you're in.
Okay, so based on you know this idea that you know you left the states, you'd done a lot of different things, you'd experienced quite a few environments there and sit in different situations, some which you were able to influence maybe more than others, and then you come back to the UK and your first job is at Barking, and then within a year, a couple of years, you move on to another. I think you move on to Oakland just
Yeah.
as you've been through those programs, and we're going to talk a lot about Nottingham this evening anyway. But when you were at Barking, you went to Oakland. What were the best things that you experienced in those different environments?
I think at the time, I think, you know, and anybody that knows women's basketball in our country, even people outside of our country know that like Barking were putting young kids and have been for a long time in better situations than most other clubs in our country. So, you know, I was very adamant that I wanted to one, you know, work with an environment and a group of people that were trying to put young people in an environment they could be successful, and it wasn't necessarily it wasn't a hindrance for them to be British, because I think we have a very pessimistic view of our game, And I felt like Barking was one of those places where young kids you could work with the best young players and still have them achieve higher than what people have said that they could do. And I thought Barking did a really good job of that. I think when you look at Mark Clark is one of the best coaches I've worked with in terms of managing in-game situations, timeouts, those kinds of situations. He does a really good job of that, and he's got a wealth of experience. He's coached national team, he's coached the senior women, he had relationships with all across Europe. He's coached some of our best talent we've seen. So I think being in that environment really helped me initially understand a lot about the top table in women's basketball in our country and the academy league. And I think so for me that was a really big piece. One of the reasons why I went there, and one of the things I think I really got from it, and and I got a better understanding of how our league works. I think from the Oakland experience, I was at the point where, you know, at the time when I came back from the States, I just, that last season I coached at LSU, I coached at Tennessee State, I coached at Gardner Webb, I was coaching at Division Ones, Division Twos, I was coaching elite level players. I was in a really, really good place with my own personal view of my coaching. I was going to a lot of clinics, I was learning, I was applying, I understood my own style of coaching. And then to come back to the UK and have to come into an assistant role, I think was a nice challenge. But what I found was I got a lot of information and viewpoints from other people and how they felt the game should be played. So that was good for me in many ways. But I think by the time I got to the Oakland's experience, and Lee will probably say this as well. We got on really well, but we had very different views on the way basketball should be played, and not all the time can two head coaches coexist together and it really work. And for us, we had to figure that out. And we had really good days, we had some not so good days. But what I did do was learn another perspective of a coach that again had been coming up the ranks, had done really well in some of the lower leagues in the women's game, had done really well with his national team stuff. So, and it also gave me an opportunity to work with Mark Bennett and do some stuff with that PDS system, which again was another learning curve. But I think what also came out of it was I almost grew in confidence from those two experiences because I felt like I knew what I was doing. And so even though I just come home and I'm working with coaches that are in good standing in the UK game, I was able to kind of sit and say, what I want to run, what I want to do, I'm pretty sure it will work because I'm working with these people and I know I would do it differently, but I know what I would do would work because some of the things they do, I don't necessarily agree with. Some I do. I'll take it all on board, but now I need that opportunity to be me. I think that's what it did for me most of all.
Excellent. So you get those two experience, and you talk about excuse me, where you are in terms of your own game and in terms of your professionalism and your competence, and then you get this opportunity. Well, you create an opportunity because nobody just gets given anything. You get this opportunity at Nottingham. So tell me about kind of what that looks like. You talked about being kind of I can't remember the job title, but you're like a performance coach or
Yeah.
director. Explain that for us a little.
Yeah, so primarily I've got obviously we Nottingham Wildcats took over the academy program that was basically they were in existence, but they were in the school next to our arena. So now we provide their provision. So they're a partner for us, and we provide their provision. And the structure of we have a director, which is Siobhan Pryor. We have a head of performance and a head of participation. So my role is head of performance. Um, so my goal is to look at the development of our young players on both the boys and the girls academy, and work with Kieran Wright, who does a really good job on our boys side. He works with hoods, played with hoods, and we work together to look at the development plan for those kids, and also looking at their pathway where they're going to go to university, whether it's the UK or the US. And then I do that for all of the players. So I may meet periodically with the players to talk about what they're trying to do, where they're trying to go, how they're developing. We look at putting in models for skill development and different things like that. And then I also lead the women's academy program. And then obviously I'm the WBBL head coach. From a club perspective, one of the things I've gone in and been able to do, and they've given me the opportunity to do, is to mentor and develop coaches on the club perspective side. So that's been a really nice experience for me as well, to be able to really work with our junior coaches and kind of look at developing them. And we've got some really good, exciting, I say young coaches, I just mean young coaches in terms of their coaching age and more so than their natural age. But we've got some coaches that are really bought into kind of growing and developing and those things. So yeah, so that side of it's really exciting for me.
Okay, so there are obviously other coaches, there are other clubs in the BBL that have kind of a pathway, have a program that embraces working with younger athletes. Tell me what's different about what you're doing at Nottingham. So we've talked briefly about the Barking situation, the Oakland situation. Again, two programs that have embraced working with younger players, giving them opportunities to play on one of the highest stages in the country. How will Nottingham do something different or better than those other programs or any other program in the UK?
I think the first thing that we are probably doing, and again, this isn't to speak back ill of anybody. I've been at some different programs, and one of the things I think we do pretty well is we run a really good total program. So it's not just the on the call stuff. And there's a lot of people saying that, but actually the doing part of that is a different conversation. So, one of the things I think that we do really well is, the trust just built us a new study hall. So our kids have mandatory study hall hours. They miss study hall, they don't play. It's not, we don't we don't we don't we don't kind of have any leeway with that. That's something where in UK sport is quite unique. We believe that the academic piece should run neatly alongside it, and we shouldn't sacrifice the academic piece for that. We're in the schools as much as everybody else is. We're actually going into classrooms to check on kids. Their teachers find us very approachable, so we kind of have conversations with them about different things in terms of the kids' development. I think that piece is quite, again, there's a lot of people will say they do that, but actually the practicality of doing that, and that's primarily Siobhan Pryor's role, to make sure that our kids are, doing well from an organizational standpoint and administrative standpoint, and she does a really good job of that. I think as well, we, you know, we really work hard to make sure our kids' well-being is there. So we put in periodic meetings to just figure out where their well-being is. How are they doing? How are they coping with this intense schedule that we're putting on their lap? How are they coaching with the academic and athletic balance and playing for multiple clubs? And it's they're things that we're doing every single day. We're working with them, talking to them, and then having these meetings where where kids get to give their feedback, and then we look at their feedback from a playing standpoint, from a how they're managing loading, from a social standpoint. I think that for me has been a really positive thing we've done. So I don't necessarily know if you can ask all coaches right now their relationships with the academic piece and whether they think that's even their responsibility in some of the academies around the country. But we believe it is our responsibility. So that makes us quite unique from that academic standpoint, I think. And then you look at performance wise, you've seen both programs, and you've seen our boys program come in, and I think they started the season 7-0 this year to start the season after a season where they struggled their first year. We won our last game of the season last year. This season we finished second in the North. So again, our progress on the court, we're not just saying we're doing stuff off the court. Our progress on the court is there as well. We've got, and the other thing is, we don't get me wrong, we take some kids from away, but we're doing it with local kids. We've got local kids coming in and doing work. That's not saying that other kids don't come in from outside of town, or regional kids, or some kids coming from away, because they do. If they can make the program better and they can make our groups better, yeah, we want them to do that. but we also want to make sure that Nottingham basketball is better. And that's one of the things that really appealed to me when we were looking at this move and this program, that, you know, somewhere where I could kind of go jump in with 2 feet and try and make everything in the program in the region better, rather than just have a really good team.
All good. Well, look, one of the things I wanted to pick up, and this was something that you talked about on a previous show, and you talked about the really strong role that some of the senior women play in mentoring some of your younger athletes. And
Yeah.
that's something that really kind of resonates with me. It's something that I know as a program we aspire to, but we haven't kind of managed to fully unlock that. So tell me a little bit about that process. Like, was it something that you knew you had to have? Was it something that the athletes that you recruited naturally wanted to do? How did that kind of evolve?
Well, you know, I think when you I think that initially, you if you're a good coach, you should have the responsibility to understand the club you're working at before you jump in. So your first period of time, and this is one of the things I think I've always done wherever I've gone. I've learned this process is to go in and maybe spend 6 months to a year understanding what's important to the club, not just kind of going in and saying, well, I've got this great idea, I'm going to do all these things. We're a charitable trust that is there to provide opportunities for women's basketball. You know, we're using women's basketball as a tool to better young girls, young people, and our community. So, knowing that, you had to recruit a certain kind of player with a certain kind of mentality. Not every kid wants to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having pros that want to party, or, want to do. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a choice. I mean, we probably aren't that far in age. So that, the time of growing up with Charles Barkley, some of the stuff he came out publicly and saying, it's so there isn't anything wrong with that. But what I understood coming in was that we wanted one. There was a disconnect between the women's team and our junior teams. So straight away, that was one thing that I wanted to fix. I wanted to be able to walk into a session and see a U14 kid, whether they were a top U14 or one of our weaker U14s, and still be able to have a conversation with them because they know me. And I wanted our players to be able to do that as well. So we did some things where, I had some difficult conversations about some of the posts people were posting on social media, because we said to them, if we're going to sign you and you're putting yourself in these situations on social media, that's counterproductive to the way we're trying to have you model the behaviors we want from our younger society. So we had those conversations. We had those at signing. We explain to them who we are. We get them to have a look at things, and slowly we've developed players that kind of have come in and really embrace that. One of the things, I had a really good conversation with Len, and it was after Len had they done really well at the youth level, at the under 16s, the under 16 cup and playoffs, and obviously they've been doing well at the WBBL, and we kind of talked about some of the things he does, and there's some bits that I liked about it, some bits I didn't like about it. But one of the things we went to was we went into a total practice mode. So on a Friday, instead of having these practices where our players, our WBBL team used to practice really late at night. But, I knew that we wanted to have much more of a synergy between programs. So now we had one practice a week where everybody practiced together. So we had WBBL, our U18s, our U16s, our U14s. Obviously, we have the facility to be able to do that. And what we do is I would design a practice session where we would work with the coaches. Every session for our club goes up on a whiteboard. I didn't make our coaches do that. We started to do it, and it became very contagious because they saw how much more invested our teams were by putting it on the whiteboard. Other people did that. So that creates a situation where kids are dialoguing on their own, or players are dialoguing on their own, young, old. Sometimes I would have like a quote on there, or sometimes I would have talked something earlier in the week, and I would say, okay, you four, your senior players, you guys each have a group, take 4 of those U14s, 4 of those U16s, and explain this concept to them. And then they would come back and explain the concept to the group, and then we'd run with it. So So we do some things like that created a synergy between the different programs, and you start to see the younger kids wanting to put some of the drills and some of the warm-up things that we did into their programs. You start to see them come to more games. You start to see our seniors come to our younger kids games and sit in the stands and watch those games. So naturally they develop relationships. Now some of these relationships were there before I got there. Some of the relationships were there before I became the head coach. But one of the things we tried to do was foster really good relationships with our programs. We've tried to do that. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
No, no, it absolutely does. And look, it's interesting you refer back to some of the stuff that kind of other coaches do, and like you say, in your program, some of those things might work, and some of those things definitely won't. I think I had quite a lot of feedback after interviewing Len, kind of quite a few weeks ago now, but a lot of coaches came back to me said, "What they're only training twice a week, and actually one of their sessions they've got combined with under 18s, under 16s, and seniors. Like given that scenario, it really is a wake up call to say what you can do if you recruit the right players and players that really buy into that club culture, that club concept. And these things don't happen by accident. So what you've just said about we're recruiting players who understand what the club needs and what the club's about, and what the club wants to achieve, that those things don't happen by accident. And it's really interesting for you to give some of that insight into the process. I want to
Yeah.
make sure, like I promised, I would finish on time this evening, predominantly because I've got to finish my daughter's bed, which is no joke.
Yeah.
I have to get that done tonight. But I wanted to kind of touch on two other elements, and one is about your experience with GB, and just maybe talk a little bit about how those experiences help you as a club coach, and maybe give me like one of the key differences of going into the national program in terms of how do you prep given a lot shorter preparation window. You're not going to spend 6 to 8 months developing those players. You normally have a much shorter window. So yeah, just talk about the kind of GB experience from your point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my point of view, I think the AAU experience was quite an interesting experience that had prepared me for some of the struggles you feel come with GB. Because one of the things with the AAU program I had was a statewide program. So kids would drive from 6 hours to come to one location. We'd practice Friday, practice Saturday morning, and then play on the weekend. So I was used to having limited practice, having players from all across the place that were using different styles and different situations, trying to bring them together and then trying to perform without a lot of practice time. I think that's quite common in the national team setup. I think that what I really have realised, and obviously this is my third year doing national team, it'll be my fourth year, and I've really got a chance to work with some good people. Right now, I brought in Karen Burton, who's done. I'm gonna butcher how many she's done. I think she's done 8 to 11 tournaments. As an assistant or a head coach. She's led a ton of tournaments, and I draw the wealth from the people that have done it before me, the people that have done different things. I was on the phone with Vanessa Ellis yesterday. I try and learn from those people that have done multiple campaigns or in it and in the thick of it. I think it's a ridiculous privilege to be able to even do national teams. That's the first thing I would say. It's amazing, the opportunity. It's so intense because all of a sudden you start to realize that like I've had the chance to coach on Division 1 floors in those situations, and the intensity level reminds me of those situations. That kind of like you just got to get it done. You got to figure out how you get it done. You got to figure out how you get the X and O's right. You don't like you're living and breathing basketball for 10, 11 straight days. There's no like every minute matters. And that's the biggest thing that I think I learned from the national team experience. Every minute matters. So when you one of the things I learned is that like everybody has a philosophy, but is your philosophy so rigid that you can't adapt it around the personnel you have, or is your philosophy, you know, broad enough that it allows and incorporates the talent that you have at your disposal. That's one of the first things that I think is a real key. The second thing is, and this becomes the same thing like national teams and club basketball, is the order in which you put things in becomes really important. Because I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. For me, I believe that at the beginning of seasons, if you can be a really good half court defensive team and you can be good in transition going forward and back and teach spacing and maybe have a late clock on one set potentially, you can be pretty effective. You don't need to put in a million out of bounds and a million offenses to be effective. But people put things in my mind, in the wrong order. So then all of a sudden they get in these situations and they're panicking because they now can't function. So the national team becomes even more important that you, with limited time, what goes in first. And then before I say all that, and I've said this tons of times to people, and I'll say this till I'm blue in the face, coach behaviors first. Coach behaviors first. Because at the end of the day, like we have our core coaching behaviors, the effort, communication, concentration, and a family first mentality. And they don't get all of them right. I don't get all of them right. But what we do is we really try to kind of identify those behaviors and have our players own those behaviors. Because I always laugh when I watch a coach or I watch situations. I did the same thing. I'm out there coaching tech tack when the kid's not even working hard. Kid's not even listening to me, and I'm trying to tell them tactics. What is the point of that? You see it all the time, and then that kid can't be successful, or that player can't be successful because they're not concentrating. So then you're mad down the line in game time or in a crunch moment because they didn't pay attention to your timeout, but they didn't pay attention in practice. So for me, I think that like when I the last year, and we had a big jump last year from 15 to 6 in that, in terms of where we finished in the Euros. And obviously some of that is chance, some of that is because players showed out at the right times, some of that is how the order of who you play works. But one of the things I think I learned quite quickly going into that third year was I had to pick my team based on their behaviors, because they were more important than picking them based on their talent alone. Because the talent alone will only take you so far. And when it goes dark and it's really difficult, and you're in the third day of 3 games, and people are homesick because they're young kids and they've never been away from home for that long, and they're in a foreign country and people are saying stuff that they don't want to learn. You got young black kids that have never been in some of these Eastern European countries, all new experiences for them. Their their behaviors is what they will rely on. It's not their talent at that moment. It will be their behaviors. And so you have to really challenge and understand what the behaviors is your player going to give effort in those moments they don't want to give effort, when everything is anxious and everybody's looking at them and they've just received 20 messages from all of the friends and family and older players that are at their clubs, and now they're nervous because they know everybody's watching on. What does that look like at that moment? And I think that so we paid more attention to that. And then the second bit, I think, is sorry, the third bit, probably the most important bit, is listen to your players. Listen to your players. If you are not asking questions and letting them give a voice, and making sure that they understand, because they're the ones that have to go out and apply and own whatever you guys decide as a group. So they have to have say in that. They have to have say in that. And I think that what we've had in our groups is we've really tried to put some generic feedback pieces in. We've tried to small put leaders that can kind of voice their opinion. We try to diversify the way they can give you feedback. We try to, I've tried to, in my national team's experience, I've tried to get as much feedback from my players as I think I can possibly do. And I still don't think I've done enough. But what that has done is it's let me know. I'll give you a good example. We went into a camp, and one of the camps we went into, one of the players, we had done an itinerary, but we didn't yet have all of our staff in place, so the players didn't get the itinerary. So one of our best players and she ended up being a good player in the tournament, she was so anxious in the first camp because she didn't have an itinerary, and it made her nervous. Well, she told us that. We never went into another day of camp without them having an itinerary. And it's something simple like that. Now, they should have an itinerary anyway. But if you're not asking those questions, you don't get those answers. You don't, like, even to the point where, you're asking people, okay, what do you actually understand? If we went into the game tomorrow and I said, execute this, what can you actually execute? Not what I think you can execute. What can you execute? What do you think you can execute? Because that's a little bit more important than what I think you can execute at this moment, because you're not going to have confidence in it. And they're the kinds of things that, like, I think we should be bringing to all environments. Kids should be owning their experience a little bit more. I know, you had. I heard a soundbite of the interview you had with Nina. And I think that, like, I don't think it's just a modern thing. I think that's what great coaches do. Great coaches in all walks of life, in all different situations, great coaches get the best players to own their own development so that then they have ownership of where they're going and they drive the ship. And I think that's easier said than done because we're coaches. We want control. But I mean, that's my daily rant, I guess. so,
Hey,
so
look, I love that was a great rant. That was a great rant. I'm going to pick up quite a few. I think there's often a time during these conversations that I've thought, damn, I need to sit down with this person and I need to ask some other questions. So, I guarantee you we will talk again, whether it's on a live stream or whether it's in a different format. Last week I had Coach Capoulas on, Andreas at Bristol, and literally within 24 hours we were on at his invitation. We were on a Zoom call talking about defensive philosophy and stuff like that. So yeah, you just spoke in your rant. There was so much stuff I can't unpick it all. What I really like, and resonates with some of the conversations that we have had in the last few weeks is yes, communication with players, ownership by players is absolutely key to any successful program. The bit you just talked about in terms of asking the players, right, you could have worked on something for, let's say, 6 weeks pre-season, but what can you actually do? What can you remember? What do you like? What is it that you can go out there with some confidence and execute? And then also the piece about kind of early on in the season, not over teaching, not trying to put in too much too soon, and kind of focus on, like, I think you talked about half court defense, transition both ways, maybe an end of shot clock kind of set. I think, again, that's a really useful kind of starting point for any coach going into the season, that you might have a playbook that grows and develops over the course of the season, but it doesn't have to be all done in the first 6 to 8 weeks.
no,
And then, you definitely shouldn't be surprised if you really struggle to get into a rhythm if you put too much on the floor too early. And that's a
yeah,
shout out to my players as well, because they're always asking for another offense and another this and another that. And I say, look, it's not really about X's and O's right now. It's about our ability to read the game, read situations, play with a sense of purpose and discipline. That's what determines, particularly those early games. It generally isn't which offense or which defensive sets you ran. Um, so yeah, that's massively powerful. Look, I'm just gonna check my watch, and it is bang on 8 o'clock. But I must ask this last question, and I did kind of talk about it kind of pre-show, and it's important for me, and I know it's important for a lot of other coaches and clubs out there and organisations. Look, over the pandemic, maybe it's accidental, maybe it was going to happen at some point anyway, but there's been a massive kind of groundswell in social activism, social justice, looking at racial inequality particularly. Just last weekend, Basketball England, working with Underrated and Footfire, did this kind of big campaign, engaging with lots of players of all backgrounds, of all kind of ethnicities, talking to them about the um, importance of speaking out, of engaging in difficult conversations, in facing up to kind of prejudice, and what was the other piece about privilege, um, and these are tough conversations, and I know they're tough conversations because I've had these conversations with my wife. My wife is white, I'm black. We haven't had the same experience, and we're still having these conversations now. So just from a coaching point of view, and I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of Nottingham Wildcats, so I'm asking for your own opinion, but what do you think we can do within the sport of basketball as basketball coaches, as kind of game changers and leaders to kind of further this this movement, whether you call it a movement, whether you think it's something else, but what do you think we can do?
I think and I've thought about this as well. I'm in my wife's white, and obviously we're bringing up a daughter that is mixed and is coming into this world, and I think a lot about the world that she's going to live in the future. And how she approaches it and how we approach it. I think for me, the first thing is educate yourself. I think one of the things that I've kind of learned and realized is that I don't think I'm educated enough on, obviously, there's a big talk about how, in schools you didn't really learn about Black history. I really started to really explore Black history. I spent a lot of time in the States, so I got a chance to explore a little bit more about Black history. And I've been in some areas that have been predominantly white. I've been in mixed areas like East London, where where race is really there. It's prevalent because you've got different cultures that mix with each other. And then I've been in Chattanooga, where you've got almost like a divide, where the white people live on one side and the black people live on the other side. And same thing with wealth, and it's like some black privileged people live on one side, some white privileged people live on the other side. So I've had those experiences. I think the first thing you've got to do is educate yourself. For me, I'm reading a book right now. I'm reading David Lammy's new book, Tribes. I'm really trying to understand. There's a couple other books that are on my reading list. I'm trying to watch and learn and understand. I think that I think that's a starting point. I think the other thing is you've got to be willing to have a conversation. I'm, if I'm being honest, I watch the NABC and I watch the top coaches in the women's basketball sit down together and have a conversation on their views on race. I shared that with our coaches at Wildcats, and some of our club coaches. I shared that with some of the people that I work with. I think there's a lot of people doing work behind the scenes. I'm hopefully one of those people that's trying to kind of create a better environment for our young coaches and our young players coming through. But I think that it's creating environments that where people can have real conversations, real robust conversations, conversations that don't skirt away from the real issues and the facts, so that they're not just feel good sound bites. They're more about kind of like, okay, what does it actually feel like? What can we actually do? What is the impact of what is actually being done? I think that's what I'm starting to think about more. How do we educate ourselves and others? And the only way that is done is through conversation, because I think that it's people have to understand that, like, there's some educated people out there that have views that are racist, but they almost don't think those views are racist because they're in an environment where those views are not being challenged. Now, for that kind of person, the only way you help them is by putting them in an environment where they can be challenged, and then people can move forward. Only through conflict comes change. Only through friction comes change. So we must embrace the friction, but again, we can't be in a place, at least for myself, is you know, you know, I'm black. I've been black before the movement. I'm gonna be black after the movement. so from my perspective, I've got to keep working. I've got to keep showing and leading by example, because I look at myself as a black leader. I'm privileged enough to be in the WBBR. I'm privileged enough to be a national team head coach. But with those things comes responsibility and accountability, and I know that. But I do feel that it's really important for me as a person to make sure I continue to educate myself and continue to be available to conversate with whoever. And I want to continue. I wish we did more stuff like where there's 4 to 5 coaches, where they're all black panels, mixed panels, whatever we're doing, but just panels where people are sitting down and having a conversation like this and really being honest about their views, because I think that is going to be what people will open eyes. So yeah, that's I'm very open to that. I'm doing some of that, but I'm trying to do it in different mediums. I'm trying to figure out how other people are doing it. So I had an opportunity to speak to some of the top US coaches and figure out what are they putting in with their clubs. So we're looking at how we can put some stuff within our club throughout the year that allows us to do more with social justice, because none of us are doing enough. And it only highlights it when something like George Floyd happens, or Breonna Taylor happens, and it becomes national spotlight. Or you look at the Rooney Rule and the impact, people were talking about that years ago. So, I just think that we have to continue to educate ourselves, and we've got to continue to create environments where people can speak honestly and open. And again, some people are going to hear stuff they don't want to hear, and that's black and white people included. But being willing to have those conversations, because I'm sure some of the conversations you probably get to have with your wife are probably not conversations that other, you know, black and white people get to have together. And I think that that's one of the challenges that we're struggling with, is that now we're getting into a point where people aren't comfortable saying anything, and when that's where we've been for the last 5 to 10 years. So we got to continue to get people to talk and communicate with each other.
Look, I think the point you made. I think that one of the first points you made was about the need for black people to continue to educate themselves. It is such a powerful thing because I think that there's a number of views, and I'm not going to try and cover them all now, but there is this kind of belief that black people, because they have experienced racism, they know what to do about it, and
Mm-hmm.
that's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think there are people who have had experiences, who have worked in organizations, who have worked at building culture, at being role models, who might have some ideas, but I don't think there's any one person who could say, look, if we did these 5 things, we could live in a better world, in a more kind of humane society, in a more open society, in a more accessible society, a society with more equity and equal opportunity. I don't think there's anybody who has all of that. So, I know that am somebody that has looked into how our history has been created, how the history that we currently receive and are subjected to in the English education system is not a universal history. It's a very kind of imperialist, colonialist type of history, and something definitely needs to change within that kind of educational system. But there's that responsibility that we all have all the time to continue educating ourselves, and that is by choice. And whether you do that via social media, there are some people are real social media haters, and that it's all fluff and it's all this and it's all that. There are some great people out there who are putting out some great content that allows us to access kind of different opinions, different philosophies, different approaches, different historical stories that talk about black history and the importance of black people throughout history. And that's something that I know, if I as a parent don't take responsibility for doing that, I can't be surprised if my child grows up and doesn't understand where she fits in that history. And
100%.
that is my responsibility as a parent. It's my responsibility as an educator. It's my responsibility as a coach. Now, the coaching bit is the coaching bit, and the basketball bit is really interesting, because I know there have been some clubs that have been very quick to say, we are an equal opportunity kind of provider. We believe in social justice, and it's great if you can say that and you know that you can back it up. but it's a very different thing when you actually look into, well, what do we do in the club? And we've talked a lot tonight about creating environments, about creating and influencing culture. What do we do actively within our club to create that culture of opportunity, of access, of equity? And those are some of the hard questions that organisations, Basketball England, Sport England, have put out a statement saying we know we're not doing enough. So it's small organisations, it's large organisations. The thing that you talked about in terms of the panels, you've just given me an idea for a show. So this is my invite to join one of our panels. We'll do it. It's a very simple thing to do, but it's. I think you're right. I think it is going to be a powerful way to engage people in some difficult conversations. I'm up for having those conversations. I definitely don't have anywhere near all the answers, but I would like to think that I'm willing to learn from anybody. So yeah, let's do that. Let's do that, Kenrick.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's exciting to me. I think one of the things I'd like to say this as well. Like I've done the same. We've gone out and bought our daughter some books. My wife has done a good job of kind of, you know, when you have a child where the dolls don't look like her, the stories, the kids in the stories don't look like her. We've been very conscious of that anyway. But I was kind of one of those people was like, really, am I educating my daughter? If I, does she understand who people are? Who Rosa Parks is, who Martin Luther King is. Does she understand any of those things? So we bought some storybooks that allow us to do those. I think the big piece for me is perspective. I learned this like pretty early on in my coaching career that and I always give this analogy to my players that like you put an apple on the table and you have five people draw it from a different angle. Everything is different, but they're all true. None of them, I mean, unless you're a real bad artist, but they're all showing you, like they're all looking, they're not lying about what they see. It's just a different perspective. And I think sometimes we get lost in that like the need for different people's perspectives are really important in our culture right now. And we get carried away with this is right, this is wrong, in opposed to let's look at the perspectives and come to a realization of what is actually true, because that's different. So,
Amen.
yeah.
Amen. Well, look, I think that's a great way to end tonight's show, and it's probably the start of another conversation that
Yeah.
we definitely should have, and I look forward to inviting you and some other coaches on, and not just coaches. Like we've done some great interviews with players, and there's a lot of people that make up our basketball community. So we need to have a lot of those conversations with different people. Kenrick, thank you so much for taking the time out. You're on holiday and you still managed to commit to making it to the show. I really appreciate that. So please thank your wife and your daughter. I know I've stolen you away for about an hour from them. And yeah, I wish you all the best coming into the season. We definitely need to have another talk, because I didn't even get to talk about kind of how recruitment's going, coming into a year with a pandemic, and do you have any plans for if we have a second spike? So don't answer, because we just have to have that conversation
Definitely.
another time. But thank
Definitely.
you. Loving your fro, by the way. Have you still got your
Yep.
comb? Still got your comb?
Yep. It's right
You
here. It's right
you were
here.
taunting me. You were taunting me with your comb earlier
You
on,
know what
because
I
I
mean?
can't do that anymore.
I had to make sure. I said I wouldn't cut it till our first game, so that my daughter, me and her made a deal. So I'm keeping it. It's growing
Hey,
gracefully.
I hope your first game starts on time.
Yeah. Could be interesting, right? No, I appreciate it,
It
man.
could
Thank you
be.
very much for having me, man. Yeah, I've
Hey,
enjoyed it a lot.
seriously, anytime. Kenrick, thank you so much. Everybody else, thank you for listening. As always, you can go and check our URL on the Upstreamedia page. I always will eventually do a kind of abridged version, where you can listen to this story all over again with lovely pictures and another video. So please do subscribe to my channel, do whatever you're supposed to do. I never remember any of the things that you're supposed to say. But thank you so much for your time. Have a great evening. Enjoy this beautiful weather that we've got. I hear it's going to rain tomorrow or the day after anyway. But
Yeah.
yeah, enjoy the summer, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.
Bye.